with the PC release of Call of the Wild theAngler coming tomorrow, I thought it would be appropriate to at least try to answer the question, is the game going to be worth your money? Now, I should start out by saying that I cannot make the decision for you, but what I can do is at least attempt to present what I think is the relevant information for you to make the best possible decision for your situation. And in my opinion, one of the most relevant pieces of information is actually in the title of the game. It is a Call of the Wild game, though I wouldn't say it's on par graphically with the Hunter Call of the Wild. It does fit into the same category in a lot of other places. Much like the Hunter Call of the Wild, theAngler is not a perfect simulation of the outdoor activity it focuses on. It's much faster paced than real fishing, it's far more simplified than real fishing, and naturally, it's far easier, but for whatever reason, in my opinion, it's actually fun. Not only that, it is accessible. You don't need to be a pro, you really don't need to know much about fishing at all to actually get in and enjoy it, and it's really not incredibly grindy to acquire the top gear. Now, that could be good or bad depending on how you look at it. I actually would prefer that it would be a little more difficult to get some of the best gear, but again, that is kind of down to personal preference how you like your games to progress. So on a surface level, if you're looking for a true-to-life, authentic fishing experience, probably this is not the best game for you. There are other games out there that do that particular thing better. If you're looking for something to do that's based in outdoor simulation without wanting to dedicate a ton of time to be able to succeed, I think this game could actually fit those criteria for you. So on that note, I wanted to go over some of what I consider the pros and cons of the game. First of all, it's very easy to get into, again with little to no knowledge of actual fishing, but actual knowledge can certainly help. Things like the different techniques, lure selection, and location selection for instance, it does seem as though going near cover, rocks, and things like that can certainly help. Knowing what types of fish tend to go after what lures, I've seen that as well definitely kind of translate into the game, and even with the techniques, knowing even what jigging is will definitely put you ahead of someone that has to learn all that stuff. So if you've been fishing, if you know a lot about it, it certainly does give you an edge over someone who maybe has never gone, but I think the game does cater to both audiences. There also is plenty of variety, be it in the gear selection, the amount of fish species, or the different environments you can explore, and I think it's fair to expect more to come, as EW tends to support their games for years and develop and add new content. There are 12 fish species on the Golden Ridge Reserve map to begin with, and a ton of gear selections from the different rods, reels, lure combos, and all the different apparel selections. And again, lots of different environments to walk through. A pretty large map with a lot of different places to go. I think that certainly helps in giving you a unique experience for at least quite a long time playing the game. The next thing I would say is just one word, and that is multiplayer. Now, multiplayer could have gone really either way, but I think it is pretty well done. Some of my favorite experiences thus far in Call of the Wild theAngler have been jumping in a boat with a friend, going out to the middle of a lake, going up a river, and just casting out and seeing what we can reel in. Now, it's done, in my opinion, in a pretty smart way. The fish spawns are client-side, and what that means is that you will not see the same fish as your friends, and while it could be cool if you could point out a fish for your friend to catch, I do like that you're not going to be competing for the same fish, and especially because the game is server-based, you can play in single player, but anytime you go into multiplayer, there could be any number of different people in there, so you can rest assured, even if you have someone driving around a boat right in front of your fish, they're not going to spook or take the fish that you are actually after. I think multiplayer is well done, it's really fun. Probably the thing that I would recommend doing the most is joining a friend and going out and seeing what you can get. And I do consider it a pro. I definitely could have seen it being a con if it was problematic, but in my experience it's worked well. Now, in terms of the fishing itself, there is, in my opinion, enough of a realistic feel to some aspects of fishing that it can produce at least moments where you feel like you are really out there fishing. Whether it is the first unexpected strike, whether it is the first really big fish you catch and you can just kind of feel the weight of the fish on the end of the rod, or different things like that. It certainly isn't the entire experience, but there are those couple of minutes, especially in the early game I think, that really you can appreciate about this game. And along those same lines, it is fast-paced enough to keep attention, but it certainly is not non-stop fish, particularly with the big fish, lake trout, pike, even some of the bass that I've fished for. you can go a fairly long time in between fish. Now, if you're using the correct lure combination and going for easier to catch fish, it can be just about every cast, but it's certainly not like that when you go after some of the larger species, and again, you can fish out areas, so you're going to need to move around, you're going to need to be willing to move to other areas if you want to continually catch fish, but I do think there's a pretty decent balance in there, although I wouldn't mind if it was adjusted just a bit to make it a little bit harder sometimes to catch fish consistently. Now to move on to some of the cons, and I think the biggest thing for me right now is there's a bit of a lack of incentive to go beyond catching a diamond of every fish species. There's no lodge, no aquarium, not even a photo album to kind of keep track of your records. Now, there are in the profile page some statistics about your biggest catch, statistics about your strike success percentage and all that, but it's really not enough for me to think that I could come back and replay time after time, especially after having a diamond of everything. And you can keep track of your own records, but it certainly would be nice if the game would do a better job of that. Again, to speak to some of the real fishing side of things, some of the fish animations are robotic, and that certainly can hurt the immersion. Whether it is the fish just swimming around, fish jumping out of the water, or fish on the end of your line, some things just don't flow, they don't look natural, and that really can take you out of it. Now, is that the type of thing that could be fixed? Probably, but at least as it stands right now from my experience, there is a little bit too much of that. Too many times you'll see a fish that just isn't doing what you'd think a real fish would do, and to go back to the moments earlier where you feel like you are fishing, those moments make you feel like you are indeed playing a game. I would also say that there really is a lack of challenge after a certain point. Once you acquire the best gear, it gets kinda easy, and there would be a pretty simple fix to that, I think. If fish of a certain size spooked when you had line that was too big, or improper presentation of the bait, or a lot of other things, you certainly could kinda curb the get the best equipment and just pull all your fish in at will with no struggle whatsoever. I think if those types of mechanics were added, that could kind of resolve it, but for now, I've been able to catch, 2-pound fish on 55-pound braid, and that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It should definitely be a little bit different. Now, some species don't mind. Bass, for instance, a lot of times you could catch them on rope if you really wanted to. They tend to be really aggressive, and there are other examples as well, but for the most part, I think it would be best if small fish got spooked from too big a line, and most fish, I think, should be spooked from improper presentation, and I think spooking fish should give you a better penalty. When you are doing a particular technique, and maybe if you mess it up and that technique in the bottom right, that indicator goes away, the fish will swim away for a moment, and as soon as you go back to that technique, they are once again attracted. I would really like if there was at least, a 30-second or minute penalty where the fish just won't come in. It would require a little more skill and a little more consistency, and I think in a game that really right now is lacking some replayability with the no lodge or aquarium, as I mentioned, that could certainly help. Needing more skill to land big fish definitely would have you coming back to play more, I think. Now this kind of falls into the same category in there being a little bit of a lack of challenge, but there are just too many fish visible from the surface, and they swim way too slowly. I think difficulty modes could really help the player cater the game to their wishes. Maybe a difficulty mode that removes the UI, don't have the strike indication on screen, so you have to know based on the rod and what's going on if a fish is actually biting. And I really would love if the bobbers were more visible at long range, because you kind of have to rely on the bobber indicator in the bottom right when you are bait fishing to know if you're getting a strike or not. You really can't see the bobber moving, and just things like that make it too easy. But difficulty modes could be a solution, or in general just kind of improving the AI of the fish, improving some of the mechanics. As of now, again, it's fairly basic and fairly simplified. I'd love to see that get a bit more creative down the road, but again, I have to look at it as a con right now, because I can't project what is going to happen. All I know is, I wish there was more challenge to landing, especially the big fish. And lastly on my list of cons, the camera. I've talked about it in every video and every stream in which I've played the Angler. I really do not like that the camera follows the rod. I just feel like that also takes away some of the challenge. If you were able to focus more on the fish and see what it's doing, you could make counter moves to keep tension on the line properly, and also kind of along that same vein, I've felt that there is a lack of punishment for allowing slack in the line. Fish should be able to throw the hook at that point, and that really doesn't happen in this game. But to continue along where we're going here with the camera section, either an ability to free control the camera, maybe by pressing another button, and I know that could be difficult on controller, or just leaving the camera facing the fish itself. I don't know that you really need to have the camera focus on the rod, so in my opinion that could really help with some of that. And I've also heard complaints about some of the different techniques, twitching or jigging, particularly when watching streams or videos, causing a bit of motion sickness. And again, if the camera just kind of focuses on where the bait is, or just the center of the screen, that would be alleviated as well. Also, with some of the camera things, the Jeep driving is just not great. I really wish they would just make it third person. The option to drive in first person is cool, but it can just be too fast, and that part, the motion sickness has affected me as well. I really don't like driving the Jeep. I tend to maybe take it somewhere to unlock a fast travel point, and then just fast travel from there on out and run wherever I need to go to. And the last thing I would include in this category are the UI. I just feel like that is a little bit difficult to understand and work with, and just certain mechanics, whether it is top water lures needing to have more water displacement and more noise when using them, the fish being far too slow. They really only seem to be able to catch up to your lure if you're on 1 speed for the retrieval, which is the slowest speed. Stuff like that really could kind of be fleshed out a lot better. So overall, my kind of opinions on this game basically are this. I don't play fishing games. I've really never been able to get into fishing games, and for whatever reason, I do enjoy this one. And the best explanation I have is the Call of the Wild explanation I made at the beginning. I think it is just a pretty decent balance of simulation and fun, probably more leaning towards the fun side, which happens to be more appealing to me as someone who doesn't play a lot of fishing simulation. I do think it's fair to expect fixes and content additions down the road, so that certainly could make the game a little more interesting. And on that same side, right now, it's pretty limited. I could really see things opening up with another map or two, especially saltwater and new mechanics. Fly fishing could help, as I mentioned, with like the topwater lures being improved, just things like that to make it a little more immersive. And trolling as well off the back of boats, especially in multiplayer, could be a pretty cool thing to work in. But as of now, things are fairly linear, and I hope that can be expanded on. And I'll leave you with this. I see Call of the Wild theAngler as the fishing simulation equivalent of the Hunter Call of the Wild. Not the most accurate simulation, not the deepest mechanics, but made for a broader player base to be able to enjoy. The Hunter Call of the Wild became easily the most popular game in the genre, in my opinion, for those same reasons of appealing to a broader player base. And we'll see where Call of the Wild theAngler ends up going, and if the player base interested in fishing simulation will take to a more accessible approach to the game like the hunting simulation community did. So is Call of the Wild theAngler worth spending your money on? Only you can answer that, but I hope I could at least help provide a bit of insight and information to make that call. So as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.